day of Diddy's trial. Now we have Diddy's trial latest of Capricorn court testimony. Now let's roll this and get this underway, y'all.
Later, the general manager of a hotel that Diddy frequented in Beverly Hills testified that Diddy stayed there under aliases such as Frank White and Frank Black, names Cassie says he often used when checking in for freak-offs. Now, the judge hopes that this trial will conclude by July 4th, but the prosecution says it needs at least 4 more weeks to present its case against Diddy. So factoring in those 4 weeks, about another month, and then the jury having to convene and come to a verdict, this trial could obviously take a bit longer than that. Certainly complicated factors to add into the equation. Gine, that's the latest we have live here in Lower Manhattan. We'll send it back to you. Thank you so much.
Great news, Spectrum Internet customers. Now you can try Spectrum Mobile risk-free for a full year at no cost to you. Bring your own device.
I want to say thank you guys for tuning in, man. We got another day of Diddy's trial, man. Please, you guys share, subscribe to this channel, man. There are multiple celebrities that rumors is surfing that Pharrell, Suge Knight name is being dragged, and there's a lot of other celebrity names. So let's get this thing going, you guys. Please, subscribe to the channel, share this video. Let's go.
State versus Sean Combs, a.k.a. Diddy, a.k.a. Puff, a.k.a. Puffy, a.k.a. Puff Daddy, a.k.a. Love.
He wants that jury to think of him as Mr. Rogers.
Wash your filthy mouth out with soap. He is a criminal from the beginning to the end.
Everyone may agree that Combs was a bad boyfriend.
A bad boyfriend?
The bad boy lifestyle isn't the same thing as a criminal lifestyle.
Oh, yeah. It's a death knell. We are live at the courthouse, and joining us now, investigative reporter Lauren Conlon, star of Pup Crime TV. Lauren, thank you for being with us. A lot happening in the courtroom today. What happened?
After Kid Cudi took the stand today, we heard from a celebrity makeup artist, Myra Morales, who was very good friends with Cassie, and she described an altercation before the VMAs in 2010 where she was in a conjoining room. So I guess 2 double suites is how I understood it. And she talked about how she heard but didn't see what appeared to be a altercation between Cassie and Diddy. And she saw Cassie's injuries after the fact. She told Cassie to go to the hospital, and Cassie did not. But she testified that she remained close with Cassie, and Cassie felt comfortable enough to stay at her house. She even said that during one occasion, she called one of her doctor friends to come over and look at Cassie's injuries. And she also had Cassie talk to one of her lawyer friends, but nothing ever came of that. During the cross-examination done by Anna Esteveo, she really hammered Morales on the fact that she's done 2 documentaries about Diddy and multiple media interviews, totaling 8. She
The 5 a.m. call time.
Where's my laptop?
The last minute assist. Going live.
He had some crazy big dude that was 5 times the size of Capricorn administering lie detector tests and threatening to throw her in the river. What the mafia does. You'll pay your debt. What do the mafia do? They come get you. They put you in a trunk. They tell you to pay up or they're going to put cement on your shoes and throw you in the river. That is mafia stuff. That's legit. Well, that was going on in New York at the time, in the 80s and 90s. They literally would.
Right? A duck by any name is a duck. And so the reality is drugs, money, but in addition to that, let's talk about what Cuddy brought to the table. He talked about the issue of arson. He talked about the firebombing of his Porsche. That gets you to that. In addition to that, he talked about the burglary of his home, the removal of surveillance cameras. So that's certainly significant as it relates to what this alleged criminal enterprise was doing. However, he also gave something to the defense, and that's
Now it's obvious, Kid Cudi, you know, was an eyewitness in this case. Now, I want to say this, you guys, that Diddy was running this enterprise, and that there are numerous celebrities names that's mentioned in this case. Now, names will shock you. That now Pharrell name, then they got Suge Knight's name being dragged. I'm quite sure there are some big names that's going to be dragged more in this case. And that the government will lively prove that Diddy was running an enterprise for 20 years. Sex trafficking, hiring sex workers. I mean, you can't make this kind of stuff up, y'all. Now let's go and hear what they have to say about Kid Cudi.
that was his relationship with Kathy Ventura. She's a star witness of the government who had a long-term relationship with Sean Combs. And that relationship had a lot of violence, a lot of destructive behavior on the part of Combs. And that's what we saw the videotape that was played over and over with juries. There's no question that he was a central witness, but of course he said also that he dated her, and it's Kathy Ventura, and he felt somewhat late because he didn't know that she was still with Combs. And so the defense will seize upon that and say, hey, she manipulated Cuddy and she's manipulating you. In addition to him, though, we heard from a psychologist, and the psychologist was important because she spoke about how women behave when they have these real relationships that are predicated upon physical force, violence, etc., that go to show some of the conduct. Because remember, Audi, what we have here is not any testimony concerning him beating her, her saying, no, I'm not going to engage in these freak-off wild parties where there was this rampant, activity going on. And we have the reverse. We have certainly text messages, emails saying she right? Which is extortion, where he, that is Combs, reached out to her and said, "Give me $20,000. She owes it to me. That is your daughter, and I want it." And the mother sent it. And so I think with Cassie and her mom, the psychologist, those were certainly compelling witnesses. There were a variety of others as well.
Joey, it's sort of odd to understand this, but we're in the Me Too era, or post-Me Too era, and so much of this conversation is around Cassie Ventura's motivations. It's kind of the equivalent of...
Now, assistants. I guess this was Diddy's assistant, Capricorn Clark, testified over Sean Diddy's Combs' Kid Cudi and Cassidy relationship. The third week of this testimony, it says Sean Diddy Combs' sex trafficking and racketeering case will bring more prosecution witnesses to the stand, including Combs' former assistant, Capricorn Clark. In testimony last week, Scott Kid Cudi alleged that Clark called him to say that her boss had broken into his home. Other former assistants had testified saying that they procure drugs and other supplies for Combs, as well as witness his physical abuse of his former longtime girlfriend, Cassidy Ventura. It says the star witness in the trial of Ventura alleged she was coerced by Combs and his associates into participating in alleged freak-offs, sex party with male sex workers, and copless drugs that looks so auspicious. It took place in these hotel rooms in major cities as well as overseas. So now it says Ventura, 38 years old, also alleged that 55-year-old Combs used videos of parties to blackmail her. So you can imagine that he used these explicit videos to blackmail Cassidy character. So it says Combs has pleaded not guilty to the charge of sex trafficking, racketeering, conspiracy, transportation to engage in prostitution. His defense team has argued that Ventura was a willing participant in the parties and had attempted to show that the pair was in a casual relationship but was fueled by jealousy, drug use, and violences. In late 2022, well before Sean Diddy Combs got into a real trouble, a man Los Angeles approached Wallace with an offer. The man was a scout for a right underbelly photograph mark YouTube channel about people struggling with issues such as abuse or addictions. Wallace, aspiring singer who sometimes made money doing sex work. So it says, and another revealing shocking. It says, in an interview, she recounted an alleged incident from 2018. A crown prince So it says a crown prince. So now these charges are adding up. So it says the Diddy allegations are shocking. More witnesses is coming forward. Let's go. It says the Diddy allegations are shocking, where they also business as unusual. It says here, The unraveling of Sean Combs' case, allegation party, and major moments. Sean Diddy Combs could be sent to prison for life if convicted at his trial of federal sex trafficking and racketeering charge, which start back in May 5th in New York. So it says, but regardless of the trial outcome, the hip hop icon must also contain with more than 80 people who have filed sexual assault lawsuits against him since November 2023. Combs blanket denied of wrongdoing have not stopped accusers from stepping up forward with dozens of more of these witnesses coming forward. This is insane. So now, as the court was breaking for lunch, the prosecution says it feels that it was ahead of schedule in presenting its case against Sean Diddy Combs. The government has initially asked for 6 weeks. You see how they dragging this? So they're asking for 6 weeks, but said it's on pace to finish in 5. A light cheer echoes through the press room. So it says the judge has previously said he is aiming to have the case wrapped up by July 4th holiday weekend. So it says the defense attorney, Mark, questioned Capricorn Court about the nature of the work she did for Sean Diddy Combs as well as their relationship. It says Clark began to work as a professional assistant, then a personal. She testified she was a sounding board for Sean Diddy Combs' Vote or Die campaign in 2004. So it says Clark was fired for 3 to 4 weeks that year, she says, and after an incident in which diamond jewelry entrusted to her care had gone missing. Clark says she was held on the floor in a bad boy building all day for 5 days to answer the question why, hooked it up to a lie detector machine. Now, Mark asked her if she ever went to human resource at Bad Boy about that incident. Clark said she had not. I was happy to be fired, Clark testified under cross, saying she'd rest during that time. Combs' 35 birthday party in New York brought Clark back into the fold. She said after another member of Combs' entering circle asked her to work on the celebrity guest list. Clark left again in 2006 after an incident that had occurred. So it says, Clark have gotten emotional, describing the nature of the relationship and the work she did for Combs. I think I was a really good employee for him, she says, adding that it was complicated right before Mark paused question. So Clark told Combs she had the biggest crush on him. So it said during the start of the Clark cross-examining on Sean Diddy Combs' trial was learning a lot. So during the start of cross-examination, Clark says that Sean Diddy Combs was leaning intentionally over the defense table, his hands clapped it on top of it as Clark was being questioned. Now, Clark is learning a lot in this trial. That she was once Sean Diddy Combs' assistant. So now, under Combs, Clark says she was hired as his personal assistant in 2004 before eventually becoming a global brand director. Says anything involving his name and likeness flew under her, Clark says. Now let's go.
Like, not she deserved it, but did she want it? Did she participate in it? Is that surprising in what is essentially a RICO trial?
So what happens is that it is RICO, and RICO is usually used, right, in terms of getting mobsters and others who run criminal syndicates and bringing them to justice. Here you have it used against Sean Combs. But in addition to that, Ali, what you have is you have sex trafficking allegations. Now, in order for the government to get to the issue of sex trafficking, of course, it makes it federal because it's across state lines. Was this occurring in New York? Was it occurring in Florida, California, internationally, in fact? So they have to show that to make it federal. But you also have to show force or coercion. And so the reason that you have this battle, you have this psychologist, you know, this whole issue of whether it was forced or whether it was not, is because in order to get to trafficking, you have to show the element of coercion. And so that's the battleground here. The defense shows that it was consensual and a freaking lifestyle. It's one thing. It's not guilty. If it's shown by the government that it was forced, it was coercive, and because of this abusive and controlling relationship, it gets you to another place. And that's why even in the two-generation movement, we're hearing.
Look, we seeing that this relationship was violent. So it was a violent relationship. All they got to do is and prove that this was a violent relationship, that Diddy was running an enterprise for 20 years. And that he violently drugged his victims, cohorted them. So Clark, now let's get back to this Clark. Clark wanted to work with Combs again despite the alleged abuse that she was hearing and that she was seeing. So it says it was as recently as April 2024 that former employee Capricorn Clark wanted to work for Sean Diddy Combs, whom she had accused of abusing her, kidnapping her, and psychologically tormenting her for years. Clark decided on a cross-examination that during a meeting last year with Combs' lawyer Mark, she brought up wanting to become Combs' chief of staff. Clark also had a lawyer present at that time. So it says federal investigators have already begun investigating Combs and have a search warrant at 2 of his homes. Now, Clark testified that she was aware of those developments, that discussion of a new job possibility happens about 6 years after Clark left Combs' employment. Clark last worked for him in 2018 doing a job that involved assisting Ventura in her music careers. It said Clark also testified early that Combs threatened to kill her multiple times to ruin her life if she didn't comply with his demands. She also said she was traumatized from watching Combs repeatedly kick and reaping Ventura in a fit of a fury over her relationship with Kid Cudi in 2011. So it says Clark says she lost her job after reporting alleged kidnapping. The Capricorn Clark finished her direct questioning discussing the end of her time at Bad Boys. Clark says she had reported the event of December 22nd, 2011, the day she was kidnapped, after Sean Diddy Cohn found out that Cassie Ventura had been seeing Kid Cudi. Two Bad Boys executive, the head of human resource. Now, Harvey, the president of the company at the time. That's crazy, but it's going to be okay. She recalled telling her in response not long after she said she was put on a 30-day notice. Now, after being let go, by now she was globally brand director. She says Cohn told her she never work again, that he showed her she had no friends, and that he make me kill myself, Clark says. She says soon lined up a job offer, but that flew through, Clark says. She struggled to find and keep employment afterwards. Clark ended up returning to work as Ventura creative director in 2016, work she had done at the time of Cudi's incident. She testified that Ventura's drug use has spiked it during that period and that Cohn still approved everything Ventura did. She left the job in 2018. Clark also testified that she had met with Cohn's attorney in April 2024, a few months after Ventura filed her sex trafficking lawsuit. It's traumatized me, Clark says, of the complaint. During that meeting, Clark says she and Cohn's lawyer discussed what took place in December 2011, and there was talk about Clark enjoining Cohn's to work as his chief of staff and of Cohn's entering rehab. Clark never heard from his attorney again after that meeting, she says. Clark says she told Cassie Ventura's mother to call the police after learning that Cassie Ventura had a relationship with another famous hip-hop star. Sean Diddy Cohn brutally kicked her as she laid on the floor of his Los Angeles home in 2011. His former assistant testified tearfully on Tuesday. The witness of the Capricorn Clark told the juries in a breaking voice that Combs was enraged after he learned in December 2011 about Ventura romantic with Kid Cudi, who will name is Scott. Ventura was on the ground in full position, Clark said. She wasn't doing anything. She was crying silently. Clark described being too scared to call the police on Combs, whom she said had a gun and wanted to kill her. The witness says she didn't call Ventura's mother. He beaten the shit out of your daughter. Excuse my French there. Clark says she told the mother of Ventura. I can't call the police, but you can. Please help her. Now, I want to say this, man. Why she couldn't call the police if she was friends with Ventura? Was it this was the woman that still wanted to work, you know what I mean, with Diddy. But she did not call the police when she seen Cassie Ventura beaten. So it says Combs threatened to kill Kid Cudi on the day of a break-in, Hart testified. Now, the Capricorn Clark described a brief car chase that took place the morning Sean Combs allegedly broke into Kid Cudi's home. So it said Clark says she was swept into a Cadillac Escalade after Combs banged on her door in the early morning hours of December 22nd, 2011. She, Combs, and the security staffer went in the SUV to Kid Cudi's Hollywood Hill home, Clark says. She called Cassie Ventura on her burner phone after seeing Combs and the security staffer go into the home. Cassidy, what the F Clark recalled saying in her testimony, Clark described Combs coming into her house that morning with a gun, and that Combs had taken Clark to Kid Cudi's home to kill him. The Kid Cudi overheard the conversation and spread from his location at the Sunset Hotel to his home. Clark says she remembers seeing Cudi pulled up in the Escalade before speeding up the hills away from the home in the SUV. So it says Combs and the security staffer was outside by this point, and the Escalade gave chase, Clark says. But Cudi lost them. SUV turned around, Clark says, and headed to Cudi's home. Could be heard blurring past. So it says, now the sirens appears to calm Combs down, Clark says. He just started to maybe for the first time that morning pull himself together, Clark says. Now Combs allegedly showed up at X assistant door with a gun in his hand. Sean Diddy Combs said he was going to kill Kid Cudi the morning he discovered his relationship with Cassie Ventura, according to testimony from a former personal assistant. Clark says Combs banged on her door between 5:30 and 6 a.m. on December 22nd, 2011. It sounded like a metal clanging against her metal door, she recalled. She opened the doors to Combs, looking furious, with a gun in his hand, and he dressed slack, ripped it at. So she says Combs entered Clark's apartment with the gun. Why didn't you tell me, Clark recalled Combs saying, referring to Kid Cudi. Get dressed. We're going to kill him. Combs continued, according to Clark. Clark says that she told Combs she didn't want to go, but that Combs says he didn't care. I never seen anything like this before, Clark says. Combs had never visited her at her home before, and she had never seen him with a weapon, she testified. The way he was acting, I just felt like anything could have happened. So it says, Capricorn Court is now detailing an incident of alleged kidnapping in December 2011. Clark says she was kidnapped by Sean Diddy Combs after Combs found out that Kid Cudi was dating his on and off girlfriend at the time, Cassie Ventura. Sean Diddy Combs was often violent with his staffer. Capricorn Clark testified nothing that he fought with men and women who worked for him. Clark, who worked for Combs in a role describing Combs throwing phone at male security staff and a barber when he was upset. He also once got violent with her in the summer of 2006, she alleged, while she was staying with him in his Miami mansion on Star Island. Another assistant for Combs had testified that it was customary for those working with Combs to live in his home. The violence against her, Clark says, was an incident during which Combs got upset with her for taking too long getting back after running error. See, your problem is you want a life and you can't handle that here, Clark says. Combs told her upon her return. The next day, Clark grumbled to Combs' personal chief that she hates it here after being told there is no turkey bacon. Ignore it. The chief stepped it outside of the kitchen to relay Clark's comment to Combs, who was standing on the back of a deck of his home. He charged me, Clark says. She described Combs running towards her, then pushing her back forcefully on her shoulders. If you hate it here, get the F out of my house, Clark says, in a shaky voice as she recalled what Combs told her during the incident. She left Bad Boy Combs' company shortly after. She says that it was crossing my boundary, Clark says, her voice tightened. Sean Combs' mother is back at the courthouse Tuesday, her first appearance since the trial began 2 weeks ago, while her absence alongside Combs' children last week raised some speculation online. Photos on social media shows that they was celebrating Combs' twin daughters, Jessie, who graduated high school Thursday. The family is also together days earlier for the twin. So let's go.
A lot about intentions, a lot about her intentions, a lot about the money she collected from him in a $20 million settlement, a money that she got, from the hotel with respect to this incident, and that's the real critical issue: is whether the government can show this coercive behavior that led to her not consenting at all. That's the question the jury will have to decide.
Many more witnesses this week. Joey Jackson, CNN legal analyst, thank you. Not she deserved it, but did she want it? Did she participate in it? Is that surprising in what is essentially a RICO trial?
So what happens is that it is RICO, and RICO is usually used, right, in terms of getting mobsters and others who run criminal syndicates and bringing them to justice. Here you have it used against Sean Combs. But in addition to that, Ali, what you have is you have sex trafficking allegations. Now, in order for the government to get to the issue of sex trafficking, of course, it makes it federal because it's across state lines. Was this occurring in New York? Was it occurring in Florida, California, internationally, in fact? So they have to show that to make it federal. But you also have to show force or coercion. And so the reason that you have this battle, you have this psychologist, you have, this whole issue of whether it was forced or whether it was not, is because in order to get to trafficking, you have to show the element of coercion. And so that's the battleground here. The defense shows that it was consensual and a freaky lifestyle is one thing. It's not guilty. If it's shown by the government that it was forced, it was coercive, and because of this abuse of a controlling relationship, it gets you to another place. And that's why, even in the Me Too generation of movement, we're hearing a lot about intentions, a lot about her intentions, a lot about the money she collected from him in a $20 million settlement, the money that she got, from the hotel with respect to this incident. And that's the real critical issue: is whether the government can show this coercive behavior that led to her not consenting at all. That's the question the jury will have to decide.
Many more witnesses this week. Joey Jackson, CNN legal analyst, thank you. The prosecution and the defense, they sparred over the testimony of a forensic psychologist. Prosecutors also released dozens of new photos seen by the jury, revealing what police seized in the raid on Diddy's mansion. And the judge signed an immunity order to force Diddy's former executive assistant to testify. But here's the big question tonight. Will the jury, the actual jury, connect the dots between the explanation of a trauma bond and the role that Cassie Ventura said she lived in? The prosecution called psychologist Dawn Hughes to explain why Cassie may have stayed in an abusive relationship judge had already ruled that she could not talk about coercive control, but she could discuss more broadly why victims may choose to stay in violent relationships or feel they could not leave them. Hughes testified, quote, when you're getting unpredictable abuse and unpredictable love, that creates this intermittent cycle. It's like a slot machine. She went on to say, keep going back because you want that good feeling. They want that good partner that they got, fell in love with. That becomes an immense trauma bond. And the defense repeatedly pointed out how Hughes had not reviewed any evidence in this case, more on that in a moment. But on redirect, the prosecutor invented what you might call a kind of illegal mic drop. She asked Hughes if she'd been retained broadly by defense attorneys. He said yes, of course. The prosecutor then asked, in fact, has he previously been retained by any of the defense attorneys here in this case? She responded, yes, I have. Now, she wasn't saying that actually this matter with Sean Diddy Combs, but the defense was talking about was Brian Steele. And his legal team later said that Steele, in a different case, chose not to use Hughes as a witness in that case that he was on at the time. And the client that he was dealing with was a victim of domestic violence herself. Now, that testimony will be a lot easier to unpack and try to pull apart.
Now, Combs prize obesity from Ventura Clark testified. It says here the singer actress Cassie Ventura was paraded in front of the Capricorn cart, and another female employee asked Sean Diddy Combs told them that they was too disobedient to get a man like him. Clark says Combs called Ventura one of his many girlfriends to Los Angeles home where they were and told her to spin around and model for them on his commands. Ventura, one of Combs' main accusers at trial, followed his orders. He said, did you see that? Combs says to Clark, according to her testimony. That's why you bitches don't have a man. Excuse my French. Working for Combs was dangerous business, according to Clark testimony. A former assistant to Sean Combs says someone threatened to throw her in the East River over some missing jewelry, according to testimony given Tuesday morning. Now, Capricorn Clark was accused of theft in 2004, a couple of months after she began working for Combs. She says Clark has handed some diamond jewelry that was given to Combs on loan from Jacob, a known hip hop circle as Jacob the Jeweler. So it says Combs gave her the bag of jewelry before a flight to Miami. Soon afterwards, she realized the jewelry was missing, Clark says. Combs directed her to stay in New York while he continued to work in Miami. Clark continued. She was accompanied by a security staffer who went back to her home and searched it. The next day, Clark says she was taken to a building she was unfamiliar with and would later become the headquarters for Bad Boy Combs Company. Let's go.
So will all the evidence taken from Diddy's mansion in Miami Beach just last year. Police seized parts of AR-15s. Some had their serial numbers scratched off. They found a loaded handgun. There were high heels, a lot of them. Also bottles and bottles of astronaut glide and baby oil and lubricant. And police discovered an assortment of drugs, including ketamine, cocaine, and MDMA. The special agent in charge of that raid testified about all of it, including 6 people on the property who were briefly put in handcuffs. And the last witness in the case was his former executive assistant, George Kaplan, and he tried to plead the fifth to protect against self-incrimination, but the judge, by granting him immunity, paved the way for him to actually go on the stand. And once he got on the stand, he testified about getting his boss drugs at times. He testified about setting up and cleaning up Diddy's hotel rooms. He stocked them with clothing and candles and liquor and baby oil. He bought some of his room supplies, he said, with his corporate credit card and cleaned up the rooms after Diddy left before the maid service came in. Now, why do that? Why do before the maid service comes in? Well, because Kaplan put it this way. Protecting him and protecting his public image was very important, and that was something I was very keen on doing. And Cassie testified that Kaplan quit after seeing Diddy abuse her. Now, we haven't heard that from him yet, but he is back on the stand in the morning. And you know who else prosecutors plan to call? Rapper Kid Cudi. Recall that Cassie testified that she was once in a relationship with him, and that sent Diddy spiraling into a jealous rage. Back with us tonight, CNN Elizabeth Wagmeister, who witnessed all the testimony in court with me today, following along so closely, talked to me about this forensic and clinical psychologist. I mean, it was very pivotal for her to come in and try to explain this looming question of why might someone stay, because Cassie's credibility might be questioned for those who don't understand why. This was a pivotal witness for the prosecution because these sex crimes, they can be very confusing for a jury. There's a lot of gray area. This is not black and white. So she came on to testify to some of the behaviors that are common among all trauma victims, whether that is a victim of domestic violence, of sexual abuse, even of something totally unrelated to this. And that was key for the prosecution because she said, I am not related to this trial. I have not met with anyone. I have not met with the defendant, Sean Combs. I have not met with any of the government's witnesses, such as Cassie. So she came into this, what she said, as a blind witness, but she did corroborate what Cassie and some other witnesses have said. For instance, there was one part that really stuck out to me, Laura, when I was sitting there in the courthouse. She said that, quote, it made me curling up in a ball on the floor. That was something that she explained for a common behavior that could be seen by a victim of domestic violence. She basically saying they may curl up on a ball on the floor so that they basically stop the violence that is happening to them. Now, why this stood out to me is because I remember that this was very similar to what Cassie testified to what we saw in video that our team at CNN broke, that hotel surveillance video when she curled up in the fetal position. And we went back to some other testimony. Rashard, you remember her? She said about Cassie, quote, she went into the fetal position. The security guard is before us from the hotel, said Cassie was bundled up in the corner. And Carrie Morgan, who was Cassie's best friend, testified to corroborate her account. She said, quote, she was like a loose fetal position. So I do wonder if the jury connected those dots of this psychologist to say, even though she's not talking about Cassie, that sounds familiar. Maybe now I understand more some of the behaviors of Cassie. And there were a lot of objections, almost as if her vocabulary was so precious because of those details that the defense did not want that jigsaw puzzle to come into full view if they were related to that. There was also moments, though, when the psychologist, talked about the coping mechanisms that are used and how one decides to tell about the abuse, and also about the returning to the relationship. Describe to me a little bit about the way in which you talked about a domestic abuse victim not feeling as though they could escape, even if they wanted to. Yes, so she said that a lot of domestic violence victims, they feel trapped in a relationship. That is the word that she used. She said that these relationships often begin with love, so these victims can want that love. They are yearning for that. So that could be one reason why they come back. Another reason is financials. She explained that oftentimes the abuser will control all the finances in a relationship, and that is their way to control the victim. This was another aha moment for me, a light bulb moment where I said, that's what Cassie testified to. Looking down at my notes from court, Cassie said that Diddy controlled her rent, her cars, her clothing, her travel, and even cash. So again, I wonder if the jury said, that sounds familiar. There's a lot more to unpack, including that next witness, George Kaplan, will be back on the stand tomorrow. An assistant will unpack that. I want to talk to our grateful months as well. So follow me over to the table because we've got some really great conversations ahead. We have got defense attorney Joey Jackson, who is with us today. Also, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, where, of course, this trial is taking place, Jennifer Rogers, and defense Snyder is here as well. All right, we got a lot to unpack, so let's get right into it. And I'm going to begin with you, Jennifer. This is your old office as well. You heard from the expert witness, Don Hughes, this psychologist who was testifying as a blind expert, meaning she did not know Diddy, didn't know Cassie Ventura, and she was trying to paint a picture in general terms. How does this play for a jury? Because I got to tell you, there were so many objections today, keeping her on the tightest of leashes. She couldn't get into many things. It had to be generalized.
Yeah, I think it's really powerful. And I think the reason you saw so many objections is because the defense realized that the jury was making those connections that Smith was just talking about, right? They're saying, oh, credit cards, oh, rent, financial control. Yeah, we've heard all of that from Ventura. So there's no question it's very helpful for the government's case, harmful to the defense's case. I was a little surprised to see it, to be honest. I haven't seen that kind of testimony come in very often. So
Why were you surprised? Because they even let it in? Or
exactly, I think it's really, really uncommon. I haven't seen anything like it before. I mean, an expert usually does that case, right? Looks at the documents in your case, if necessary, introduce the witnesses in your case to draw on and to then.
But there are subject matter experts, right? We maybe talk about more broadly. You're saying what was odd was that she had not reviewed, had not talked to people. And what's the intimation? That by failing to do so, she was overgeneralizing and therefore not having the credibility? Because that's what the defense wants to go in.
Yes, so this is a big deal. And to Jen's point, if I'm the judge, I don't allow it at all. Now, it's a game changer. Why? Because I think inquiring minds want to know, right, what was the coercion? If this is about sex trafficking and not a freaky relationship, it's about the fact that I coerced you to do this.
But
Not
you can talk about coercion.
Yes, I get it, but inferences are drawn. If you're controlling everything, if you're behaving as a victim in this way, if you feel in love with someone and you have this mold of a person, right, who, if you're a victim of this violence, you tend to act this way, what is the inference that's going to be?
Look, you guys, it's obvious that Diddy molded his victims into these freak off sessions. That's why, you know what I mean, in every freak off session they had these drinks that was spiked up. So you can't make this up. So I want to talk to you guys about the testimony that Clark said in her testimony that Cohn gave her the bag of jewelry before the flight of Miami. Now it says soon afterwards she realized the jewelry was missing, Clark says. Combs directed her to stay in New York while he continued to work in Miami. Clark continued. She was accompanied by a security staffer who went back to her home and searched it. So it says the next day, Clark says she was taken to a building she was unfamiliar with and would later become the headquarters for Bad Boy Combs' company. She was taken to the 6th floor in an unfinished, she says, and directed to sit at a 6-foot long folding table. At the table was a man Clark had never seen before, whom she described as a very wry, about 5 of me, Clark estimated, holding her arm outstretched to show the man. Now the man who was chained smoking cigarettes and it says he was very muscular and drinking black coffee when she encountered him and gave a lie detector test and questioned her about the jury. Clark testified. Clark was jumping and nervous, and it was throwing off the lie detector. She recalled the man told her he will throw me in the East River if she couldn't come down, she says. So the Capricorn Clark says she developed stress of working for Sean Diddy Combs, which caused hair loss, and immune disease that could be triggered by a number of causes, including stress. Clark says she was paid $65,000 a year as her personal assistant, as his personal assistant. Excuse me. Combs allegedly had beef with 50 Cent. Now, Capricorn Clark appears nervous on the stand as she recounted a couple of incidents involving Sean Diddy Combs' former boss. She describes one incident at an MVT, well, MTV Music Awards when Combs was doing press with 50 Cent. Clark, Combs, and another entertainment manager who worked for both Combs and 50 Cent got into an elevator afterward, she recalls. Now, Clark says that they was having a back and forth recounting the conversation between Combs and the managers. She remembered Combs saying, "I don't like all the back and forth. I like guns." Combs was discussing 50 Cent, Clark says, and she previously had a bad experience. So she says she perceived his tone as very serious. Now, Clark testified that Combs once threatened to kill her. Now, Sean Diddy Combs kept cool, a demeanor, when he allegedly threatened to kill his employees. Capricorn Clark over her past connections to his rival Suge Knight, the ex-employee told the jury on Tuesday. Now, mind you, Suge Knight's name is dragged up in this. Pharrell's name is dragged up into this. So now, let's go. Combs was apparently furious, and Clark did not disclose her former employee with Knight, a fellow rapper, entrepreneur, whom Combs had a deep hatred for, according to testimony. Clark said Combs and a large bodyguard known as Uncle brought her to a spot at Central Park to send her a menacing message, close in a time she started working for Combs in 2004. Combs told me he didn't know that I had anything to do with Suge Knight, and if anything happened, he would have to kill me, Clark testified. The witness says she continued working with Combs because she felt she could have been more transparent. There was nothing I could do in Central Park to tell him I was a trustworthy person, Clark says. Clark's one of the number of witnesses being called to support the prosecution theory that Combs and members of his inner circle regularly threaten and abuse people, including love interests and members of his staff. So it says, Capricorn Clark testified that she worked as assistant for Sean Diddy Combs from 2004 to 2012 after a job at Def Jam and Death Row Records. She later came back to work under Combs in 2016, this time as a creative director for Cassie Ventura. Clark held that role until 2018. The government also point out it will surely come back that Clark says she was kidnapped by Combs in December 2011. The government have called the Capricorn Clark, a former assistant to Sean Diddy Combs, to the stand. Clark is wearing a light color long sleeve, and she's wearing a crew neck top and thick black eyeglasses, and her long dark hair is in a ponytail. So it says Tuesday testimony may address kidnapping charges. Now this is unreal, that this is why they will get him with the trafficking. Let's go. So it says the government also talk about Capricorn card through Matt by name in its open statements on May 12th. Assistant U.S. Attorneys Emily Johnson opened the prosecution statement by talking about an incident during which Sean Combs allegedly broke into a man's home and a jury looking for his on and off girlfriend at the time, Cassie Ventura. So it says Johnson described Combs arousing an assistant and forcing her to go to the man's home. We now know from last week's testimony that the man was actor and magician Kid Cudi. The assistant in the story was very likely Clark. Under racketeering counts, there is an allegation of kidnapping against Combs. Courtroom discussion Tuesday morning suggests that upcoming testimony will cover this kidnapping charge. Unbelievable. Sean Diddy Combs and his team are sitting at the table now, as are government's prosecutors. Combs is wearing a navy blue sweater and a white collar shirt, a bit a departure from the light colors he has a favorite for the first week of his trial. He is in a deep conversation with attorney Nicole as he take his go to trial notepad, a blue notebook, the kind you can find at most drugstores, out of his bag. At one point, Nicole, who was standing, covered her mouth as if in laughter and leaned over Combs. Mm, mm, mm. See, more witnesses to take the stand as the testimony enter the third week. Now it says members of the public are trickling into the courtroom that had been home to Sean Diddy's trial for the past 3 weeks, it says. But the desk was the prosecution and defense team had been sitting are still empty. So the defense don't have nobody. No victims to cross-examine on Diddy's side. So Tuesday marked the start of this third week of testimony, and it will kick off with the government calling Combs' former assistant Capricorn Court to the stand. Witnesses from the Los Angeles Police Department and the Fire Department are expected to follow. Clark's name has come up frequently throughout the trial as someone familiar with Combs' dealing. Combs' ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura, who have accused the hip-hop magician of sex trafficking her, mentioned Clark as have 2 other assistants, David James and George. On Thursday, when the actor magician Kid Cudi took the stand, he too brought up Clark's name, noting that it was she who alerted him, Ventura, that Combs has allegedly broke into his home in the Hollywood Hills. Now, Kid Cudi compared Diddy as being a person of interest. Now, New York Kid Cudi testified Thursday in Sean Diddy's Combs sex trafficking trial, and he believes that Combs broke into his Hollywood home and later blew up his portrait, all because he briefly dated Cassie Ventura. So it said the trial estimate to last week. So let's go back to when Kid Cudi stated that Combs broke in his home in his Hollywood Hills and blew up his Porsche. by putting a device in his car along with staff. Now let's roll this clip.
Right? A duck by any name is a duck. And so the reality is what does the defense have to rely on? The defense has to rely on the fact that you did not interview this specific witness. Not every witness is the same. We don't live in a cookie cutter society. You've never met, right, a defendant who you testified for. You're always testifying for the victim. You're a hired gun in this particular situation. You've met with the prosecutors multiple times and you've coordinated your testimony such that those dots can be connected. That's the defense argument. But the fact that she testified very powerful for the prosecution and the jury draws those inferences of coercion, there is problems in Diddy.
It is gearing up to be another big week in Sean Combs' sex trafficking trial. Testimony is due tomorrow, with another one of Combs' former assistants taking the stand. Last week included with rapper Kid Cudi, who testified about his brief relationship with Cassie Ventura. Kid Cudi said he was concerned for her safety as well as his own. He described a time when he said the jealous Combs broke into his home, locked his dog in a bathroom, and opened its Christmas gifts. The jury also saw photos of Kid Cudi's charged Porsche. Cudi testified he knew Combs had something to do with that damage. Joining me now, defense and trial attorney Misty Maris and former USC prosecutor Sarah Krisoff. Sarah and Misty, thank you so much for being here on Memorial Day. No doubt you'll be doing a lot of other things. I'm going to start with you, Sarah. When we saw this testimony from Kid Cudi, how impactful and important was it for the words that came out of his mouth in the stand, but also to have a whole weekend to sit with it?
Yeah, so the prosecution is trying to build the racketeering case, particularly through Kid Cudi, and hopefully from their viewpoint with witnesses to come. So I think that's been the area where there's been the least amount of testimony so far, but they're going to build that block by block and trying to convince the jury there was some sort of enterprise and all of these people that were around Holmes trying to cover up the crimes that were committed in furtherance of that enterprise.
It is actually proving the corrupt enterprise. Less exciting for the jury, but very necessary for the prosecution.
Elise, thank you so much for talking with us about this. I know you will be back. Unfortunately, Elise, former federal prosecutor, host of the At Least You Heard It Here podcast. Also want to note CNN Audio has a podcast out that's hosted by our own Laura Coates. Diddy, my jury, thanks so much. So it is now 53 minutes past the hour.
Is part of predicate crimes. Prosecutors are seeking to establish an arson, which goes towards racketeering. But Sarah, I was actually in the courtroom for Kid Cudi's testimony, so I saw he was a great witness. But the defense was able to chip away at his testimony on cross and establish that he had no direct information. He didn't see anybody. There were no cameras. There was never an arrest. Basically, throwing a little bit of doubt as to whether or not he could really say it was Combs or someone associated with Combs who actually did that damage to his car. So the defense did a good job. He also said that Cassie played him. This was his testimony, and that she was living a double life by dating both himself and Combs. Now, that speaks to her autonomy in the situation, that element of control. So the defense did an excellent job of cross-examination of getting that out in front of the jury.
Yeah, one of those moments that Kid Cudi had was saying that he saw Combs standing outside after that car was burned, looking like a supervillain, standing there with his hands behind his back. But I am curious about some of this coming in. There was no police report, there was no investigation, there was no arrest of Sean Diddy Combs at the time. Were you surprised that came in, that the judge allowed that testimony and those pictures?
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's more to come on this, because it was a lot of supposition on behalf of Kid Cudi saying, I think this must have been him because we had this warning and then the thing happened. So it was, and that is always, frankly, a danger in a racketeering case. They have this huge swath of time that they're covering. There's lots of events. There's a real question of, is all of this stuff properly before the jury?
Yeah, and that is something that obviously, if there's a conviction, that can come back up on appeal. Misty, I'm curious going forward this week of what you are expecting to hear, because so far, almost every single day of this trial has been jaw-dropping testimony.
Absolutely. So tomorrow, after this long weekend, we'll be back in session in court, and Capricorn Clark is set to take the stand now. She's come up in several different witness testimonies. She's been referenced. She's a longtime assistant and eventually became an executive at Bad Boy Records. So many of the witnesses that we've heard from so far that were affiliated or working for Combs were little snapshots of time. 2 years here, 2 years there. Capricorn Clark worked with him for a longer period of time. She also was referenced in Kid Cudi's testimony that she had reached out to Kid Cudi and said, hey, Combs and some of his affiliates are at your house, are breaking into your house. So she's certainly going to be a very important witness. And my expectation for pre-trial is that she's going to testify about the means and methods of the criminal racketeering conspiracy that prosecutors are seeking to establish.
Yeah, we're expecting, 6 weeks of the prosecution putting on its case and the defense doing its thing afterwards. I do want to ask you, Sarah, about some reporting that has come out from people. They talked to folks in the jail, and they said that Combs will have a chance to take part in a spades card game, dominoes, 3-on-3 basketball tournament, and a soccer tournament that were offered to prisoners for the holiday, as well as to have some barbecue. He is innocent until proven guilty, but is this the kind of the norm when you're in jail during a trial?
Listen, there is nothing that is good about being in the Metropolitan Detention Center. It's a pretty tough facility. And
Look, all metropolitan facilities, not safe. See, when you are a celebrity, when you in this notoriety, man, I always say, man, just like they did Tory Lane in that California correction. See, it's about making a name. These people want to make a name. Diddy he's just a number. When you in jail, all that fame, fortune goes out the window. What they will want to do, they will want to kill him in the prison. See, celebrities don't survive in prison. They need like a whole entourage. Like, they need protection. Now, if Diddy gets found guilty, y'all might tell me, well, he got money. That's the first thing they coming at. His assets. So think how, if they come after his assets and get everything and strip this man, then where he's going to get his money from? Who's going to put the money in his books? How he's going to get protected? If he gets found guilty. See, I want to say one thing, y'all. The government is not letting up, man. They want a strong conviction, man. They want to remove his assets. They want to take everything he got. So that way he don't be worth anything. Man, I always say, man, have you made that bed? And however you made that bed, you gotta lay in it, man. Because ain't nobody gonna get you out the trouble that you're in. And they said there's more celebrities, y'all. They said there's more celebrities that's willing to testify. Let's go.
these types of pre-trial facilities have a lot less access, outdoor time, educational programming that you would have at a post-trial facility. So listen, I think these are human comforts that he's being provided, but nothing out of the
norm. And this was provided for all, I think, of the inmates fair. Thank you so much, Sarah, to you, and thank you to you, Misty. We will be back asking you more questions as this trial continues tomorrow.
Joining me now to discuss is CNN legal analyst and criminal defense attorney Joey Jackson. Joey, good morning. Thanks for being here.
Of course, now.
So, since we have this pause in the proceedings, it's a good time to talk about the testimony that we've heard so far. For my money, rapper Kid Cudi was very much a remarkable witness. Can you talk about who stood out to you and why?
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, obviously, Kid Cudi, let's start there, was important because what he brings is, remember the charges out. We're talking about a racketeering conspiracy, and what the government is alleging that this conspiracy existed over the course of 20 years. And in conspiracies of racketeering, what do you have? You have guns, drugs, money. But in addition to that, let's talk about what Cudi brought to the table. He talked about the issue of arson. He talked about the firebombing of his Porsche. That gets you to that. In addition to that, he talked about the burglary of his home, the removal of surveillance cameras. So that's certainly significant as it relates to what this alleged criminal enterprise was doing. However, he also gave something to the defense, and that was his relationship with Cassie Ventura, who she's the star witness of the government, who had a long-term relationship with Sean Combs, and that relationship had a lot of violence, a lot of destructive behavior on the part of Combs, and that's what we saw the videotape that was played over and over for the jury. So there's no question that he was a central witness, but of course he said also that he dated her, that is Cassie Ventura, and he felt somewhat played because he didn't know that she was still with Combs. And so the defense will seize upon that to say, hey, she manipulated Cudi and she's manipulating you. In addition to him, though, we heard from a psychologist, and the psychologist was important because she spoke about how women behave when they have these real relationships that are predicated upon physical force, violence, etc., to go to show some of the conduct. Because remember, Audi, what we have here is not any testimony concerning him beating her and her saying, no, I'm not going to engage in these freak-off wild parties where there was this rampant, activity going on. And we have the reverse. We have certainly text messages and emails saying she can't wait to do it. So the psychologist was explaining why a woman who was controlled by a person would engage in that behavior. And of course, we heard from Cassie's mother as well with respect to something else you have in conspiracies and racketeering, right, which is extortion, where he, that is Combs, reached out to her and said, give me $20,000. She owes it to me. That is your daughter, and I want it, and the mother sent it. And so I think with Cassie and her mom, the psychologist, those were certainly compelling witnesses. There were a variety of others as well.
Joey, it's sort of odd to understand this, but we're...
So it's getting compelling, y'all. These witnesses. Now, let's get back to the testimony of Clark, because Clark denies telling Homeland Security agent that Guard was with Combs during the alleged 2011 kidnapping. Now, she had denied telling Homeland Security about the staff when Diddy went into Kid Cudi's Hollywood Kill home. So it says the defense attorney Mark suggests that Capricorn Clark, Sean Diddy's Combs' former employee, told agent from Homeland Security investigation that Combs came to her door with a building security guard the morning she said he kidnapped her to go to Kid Cudi's home in December 2011. So Clark denies telling the Homeland Security agent that Guard was with Combs during the last 2011 kidnapping. Now, on the stand, Clark repeated denies, saying that in maintain that a security guard was not with Combs. So it says Clark also testified that Combs demanded the security guard let him into the building that morning, and the guard was fired soon after. So it says Clark learned of Ventura and Kid Cudi's relationship in late 2011. She says. So the Capricorn Clark says Sean Diddy Combs' former employee testified that she was first learned that Cassie Ventura, rapper Kid Cudi, was getting to know each other around Thanksgiving in 2011. She says that Kid Cudi came to her apartment to hang out once sometime after Thanksgiving. Clark says that about a week before the alleged kidnapping, she picked Ventura up from Kid Cudi's home after she spent the night there. Carr says she understand and, and understood at the time that Ventura was in a relationship with Combs. So it says Clark worked for Sean Diddy Combs again as a creative director for Cassie Ventura back in 2016. Clark helped create a new look for Ventura to show off at the MTV Music Awards that year that required Ventura dye hair. Defense attorney Mark asked Clark to confirm Ventura was on board with the look and had a say in the decision. Clark testified that she presented the idea to Ventura, who liked it, before telling Combs about it. The defense attorney explicitly asked Combs to confirm that Ventura wasn't forced it against her will to dye her hair, which Clark did. So it says new artists like Machine Gun Kelly and French Montana was getting a lot of attention at Bad Boy around 2012, but the Capricorn Clark, Sean Diddy's Combs former employee, says Cassie Ventura seemed to be getting the same amount of attention. Clark says that even though Combs took a step back around 2016 and 17, she believed Ventura still had the same support. Now let's go.
In the Me Too era, or post-Me Too era, and so much of this conversation is around Cassie Ventura's motivations. It's kind of the equivalent of like, not she deserved it, but did she want it? Did she participate in it? Is that surprising in what is essentially a RICO trial?
So what happens is that it is RICO, and RICO is usually used, right, in terms of getting mobsters and others who run criminal syndicates and bringing them to justice. Here you have it used against Sean Combs. But in addition to that, Audi, what you have is you have sex trafficking allegations. Now, in order for the government to get to the issue of sex trafficking, of course, it makes it federal because it's across state lines. Was this occurring in New York? Was it occurring in Florida, California, internationally, in fact? So they have to show that to make it federal. But you also have to show force or coercion. And so the reason that you have this battle, you have this psychologist, you have, this whole issue of whether it was forced or whether it was not, is because in order to get to trafficking, you have to show the element of coercion. And so that's the battleground here. The defense shows that it was consensual and a freaking lifestyle. It's one thing, it's not guilty. If it's shown by the government that it was forced, it was coercive, and it was because of this abusive and controlling relationship, it gets you to another place. And that's why, even in the Me Too generation and movement, we're hearing a lot about intentions, a lot about her intentions, a lot about the money she collected from him in a $20 million settlement, the money that she got from the hotel with respect to this incident. And that's the real critical issue, is whether the government can show this coercive behavior that led to her not consenting at all. That's the question the jury will have to decide.
Many more witnesses this week. Joey Jackson, CNN legal analyst, thank you. Of like, not she deserved it, but did she want it? Did she participate in it? Is that surprising in what is essentially a RICO trial?
So what happens is that it is RICO, and RICO is usually used, right, in terms of getting mobsters and others who run criminal syndicates and bringing them to justice. Here you have it used against Sean Combs. But in addition to that, Audi, what you have is you have sex trafficking allegations. Now, in order for the government to get to the issue of sex trafficking, of course, it makes it federal because it's across state back. So they have to show that to make it federal. But you also have to show force or coercion. And so the reason that you have this battle, you have this psychologist, this whole issue of whether it was forced or whether it was not, is because in order to get to trafficking, you have to show the element of coercion. And so that's the battleground here. The defense shows that it was consensual and a freaky lifestyle. It's one thing, it's not guilty. If it's shown by the government that it was forced, it was coercive, and because of this abusive and controlling relationship, it gets you to another place. And that's why even in the two generation of movement, we're hearing a lot about intentions, a lot about her intentions, a lot about the money she collected from him in a $20 million settlement, a money that she got from the hotel with respect to this incident. And that's the real critical issue, is whether the government can show this coercive behavior that led to her not consenting at all. That's the question the jury will have to decide.
Many more witnesses this week. Joey Jackson, CNN legal analyst, thank you.
Of course.
Prosecution and the defense, they sparred over the testimony of a forensic psychologist. Prosecutors also released dozens of new photos seen by the jury, revealing what police seized in the raid on Diddy's Miami Beach mansion. And the judge signed an immunity order to force Diddy's former executive assistant to testify. But here's the big question tonight. Will the jury, the actual jury, connect the dots between the explanation of a trauma bond and the world that Cassie Ventura said that she lived in? The prosecution called psychologist Don Hughes to explain why Cassie may have stayed in an abusive relationship with Diddy for years. The judge had already ruled that she could not talk about coercive control, but she could discuss more broadly why victims may choose to stay in violent relationships or feel like they could not leave them. Hughes testified, quote, "When you're getting unpredictable abuse and unpredictable love, that creates this intermittent cycle, like a slot machine." She went on to say, keep going back because you want that good feeling. They want that good partner that they fell in love with. And that becomes an immense trauma bond. And the defense...
How easy people can come on here and say that why Cassie didn't leave this relationship. Because it's hard to leave somebody that have an empire, that ran an empire for a long time. You're talking about a multi-billionaire. You know what I mean? It's hard to leave those people like that. Cassie had a home. She had mansions she can choose from. Now talk to me, brothers and sisters, man, because you guys know this, man. If you are a wealthy person, man, it's gonna be hard for a woman to just leave. They ain't gonna leave, just leave. Now if you're a broke person, man. You're a broke heifer, man, and you are in one of those abusive relationships, violent relationships, right? A person gonna leave. They're gonna find a way to leave, man. But since Diddy, ran the empire, it's hard for a person just to leave, man. You know what I mean? Here they was together for what, 10, 11 years. They had a relationship with each other, man. It's hard to leave, man. And it wasn't true love, but there's a whole lifestyle a person saw, lived. And she was just, she was bribed into that kind of lifestyle. It's easy to get bribed into that kind of lifestyle, man. See, the world consists. See, when you look at our world today, y'all, the world. What do the world consist of? Partying, right? Drinking, smoking, right? Gambling, right? Having sex, right? All that stuff, right? So people go out and have fun. He threw one of the best wild freak off parties. You know, you heard this saying, after the club is the after party. You know, hey, that's what the world consists of, man. People want to have fun. So, man, I think, man, it all boils down who got the best argument here, man. And we don't know if Diddy's team is going to work like that. You know, because you got to put up an argument to have them believe that, well, it was you know what I mean, it was an enterprise, but I haven't, you know what I mean, it wasn't run where people thinking I ran it the way that they thinking I had ran it. But you got to understand, y'all, who was on these freak offs, who was attending at these freak offs. Now, what I don't like, y'all, is how you got these people that's high power. You got it in the courts. You got it in the educational systems, legal, political. You name it. It's right in your face. And I can bet you my bottom dollar that half of those people that was in those freak offs, them, you know what I mean, them numbers that they said that they had, they had to get rid of some of those people, man. Are you hearing me? They have to get rid of some of those people, man. You know? Which is sick and disgrace to me, because you got one man locked up, but all these people was tenants at these freak off sessions. Saw, most people may be involved. The thing I don't like, y'all, here's the thing I don't like is they show a lot of these people was here at the Diddy's parties, man. Now you mean to tell me people not saying that they don't want to say that? They don't want to get involved? Because that's what we seeing. We seeing people are being this. They're not even being subpoenaed. Some people that was subpoenaed, they took themselves off. Like somehow they just cut them off. You know? And it's just because you got money and you got this power, you say. All the money and see without money you don't have power. All that little money they holding on to, all that money they, clinging to, will be all gone, y'all. Why you think those wildfires happened over there in Los Angeles the way it did? Those people are not, believers. They are a hater of God. Are you hearing me? These people are a hater of God, and they just getting, everything they, deserve. Hollywood ain't gonna be Hollywood no more, y'all. Hollywood's gonna be complete finished. Are you hearing me right now? Hollywood is gonna be completely finished. Gone. No more. Let me say this to y'all, man, because I don't know if y'all heard about the SpaceX. Them people over there, y'all, that heard a sonic boom sound over there in Los Angeles, y'all. I'm gonna tell y'all, man. I want to get all y'all, on alert. What's going on? What's happening? That's alarm sound. That's the sound of a trumpet, y'all. To get out of Los Angeles. If you're in California, you're in Los Angeles, get out now. It's the time for you to get out, man. But y'all not hearing me, man. Y'all not hearing me what's finna go on, man. What's really finna pop off. But you know, people, like I say, people take no initiative. They ain't gonna take no initiative to this, man. Because so many people is gonna be sidetracked. They're gonna be so distracted. The Diddy's case, there's a lot of stuff coming up. I say it again, there's a lot of stuff coming up. And if you ain't ready, I suggest you get ready.
Pointed out how Hughes had not reviewed any evidence in this case, more on that in a moment. But on redirect, the prosecutor mentioned what you might call a kind of a legal mic drop. She asked Hughes if she'd been retained broadly by defense attorneys. She said yes, of course. The prosecutor then asked, in fact, have you previously been retained by any of the defense attorneys here in this case? She responded, yes, I have. Now, she wasn't saying that it was actually this matter with Sean Combs. The defense he's talking about was Brian Steele. And his legal team later said that Steele, in a different case, chose not to use Hughes as a witness in that case that he was on at the time. And the client that he was dealing with was a victim of domestic violence herself. Now, that testimony will be a lot for the jury to unpack and try to pull apart. So will all the evidence taken from Diddy's mansion in Miami Beach just last year. Police seized parts of AR-15s. Some had their serial numbers scratched off. They found a loaded handgun. There were high heels, a lot of them. Also bottles and bottles of Astroglide and baby oil and lubricant. And police discovered an assortment of drugs, including ketamine, and cocaine, and MDMA. The special agent in charge of that raid testified about all of it, including 6 people on the property who were briefly put in handcuffs.
Look, you know, black people are so sick today, man. This sister, man, so sick. You know what I mean? They show you these drugs. And they paint a dirty picture. They put it right on our people, man. Like Hollywood ain't, you know what I mean? Like Hollywood ain't like this. Hollywood always, the whole industry of Hollywood always been filled with drugs, y'all. This should not be nothing new, but they paint it on our people. I'm telling y'all, man, they ready to hit this reset button so fast, like everything's just gonna be a star all over. You know, it's a distraction in our world, man. There's black people turning on each other, man. But like I said, if he's guilty, he's guilty, man. At the end of the day. But do I believe that he should be the only one locked up? Or do we believe that there's more people, but they're not saying anything? And some of those people being let go of his RICO indictment, man. You see how fast they trying to wrap this thing up, man? I tell y'all, man. Sometimes you just don't believe so much of what you hearing, man. Because there's a lot of more of these people involved in this shit. Excuse my French, but you know, it is.
And the last witness of the day was Diddy's former executive assistant, George Kaplan. Now, he tried to plead the fifth to protect against self-incrimination, but the judge, by granting him immunity, paved the way for him to actually go on the stand. And once he got on the stand, he testified about getting his boss drugs at times. He testified about setting up and cleaning up Diddy's hotel rooms. He stocked them with clothing and candles and liquor and baby oil. He bought some of these room supplies, he said, with his corporate credit card and cleaned up the rooms after Diddy left before the maid service came in. Now, why do that? Why do before the maid service comes in? Well, because Kappa put it this way. Protecting him and protecting his public image was very important, and that was something I was very keen on doing. Cassie testified that Kaplan quit after seeing Diddy abuse her. Now, we haven't heard that from him yet, but he is back on the stand in the morning. And you know who else prosecutors plan to call? Rapper Kid Cudi. Recall that Cassie testified that she was once in a relationship with him, and that sent Diddy spiraling into a jealous rage. Back with us tonight, CNN's Elizabeth Radmeister, who witnessed all the testimony in court with me today, been following along so closely, to talk to me about this forensic and clinical psychologist. I mean, it was very pivotal for her to come in and try to explain this looming question of why might someone stay, because Cassie's credibility might be questioned for those who don't understand why.
This was a pivotal witness for the prosecution because these sex crimes, they can be very confusing for a jury. There's a lot of gray area. This is not black and white. So she came on to testify to some of the behaviors that are common among all trauma victims, whether that is a victim of domestic violence, of sexual abuse, even of something totally unrelated to this. And that was key for the prosecution because she said, I am not related to this trial. I have not met with anyone. I have not met with the defendant, Sean Combs. I have not met with any of the government's witnesses, such as Cassie. So she came into this, what she said, as a blind witness, but she did corroborate what Cassie and some other witnesses have said. For instance, there was one part that really stuck out to me, Laura, when I was sitting there in the courthouse. She said that, quote, it made me curling up in a ball on the floor. That was something that she explained for a common behavior that could be seen by a victim of domestic violence. Basically saying they may curl up on a ball on the floor so that they basically stop the violence that is happening to them. Now, why this stood out to me is because I remembered that this was very similar to what Cassie testified to what we saw in video that our team at CNN broke, that hotel surveillance video when she curled up in the fetal position. And we went back to some other testimony. Rashard, you remember her? She said about Cassie, quote, she went into the fetal position. The security guard, Israel Flores, from the hotel said Cassie was bundled up in the corner. And Carrie Morgan, who was Cassie's best friend and testified to corroborate her account, she said, quote, she was like a loose fetal position. So I do wonder if the jury connected those dots of this psychologist to say, even though she's not talking about Cassie, that sounds familiar. Maybe now I understand more some of the behaviors of Cassie.
And there were a lot of objections, almost as if her vocabulary was so precious because of those details that the defense did not want that jigsaw puzzle to come into full view if they were relating to that. There was also moments, though, when the psychologist talked about the coping mechanisms that are used and how one decides to tell about the abuse, and also about the returning to the relationship. Describe to me a little bit about the way in which you talked about a domestic abuse victim not feeling as though they could escape, even if they wanted to.
Yeah, so she said that a lot of domestic violence victims, they can feel trapped in the relationship. That is the word that she used. She said that these relationships often begin with love, so these victims can want that love. They are yearning for that. So that could be one reason why they come back. Another reason is financials. She explained that oftentimes the abuser will control all the finances in a relationship, and that is their way to control the victim. This was enough.
Now, Cassie left this relationship because, for many reasons, it could be financial reasons, because Diddy was threatening her. You got to remember, y'all, that when she was signed, and Diddy was her producer, and Diddy had the attitude, I made you, and and just take away what you have. So it was coming to a point. Cassie was, you know what I mean. She wasn't living the way that she wanted to live financially. You know, a lot of times women want to live independently. They want to live financially, and you know what I mean. But since she was living under one roof, one man, and you know that itself tells a lot in this case. You know, so not only she experienced violent relationship, experienced being abused, and you know, but she experienced that she was being threatened financially. That now, why do you think you know what I mean? Cassie came out to file a lawsuit. You know, because Diddy was threatening her to, you know what I mean, to take everything she had. Because Diddy, see what y'all got to see the big picture of. Diddy have a mind where he would say, "I made you. You won't be nothing without me. You nothing without me. I made you to get where you at today." This the attitude that he has, man. And see, I'm gonna say it like this: you can't make this stuff up, man. Maybe this man never knew what love is. He never knew what was love. He never probably never got treated with love. And sometimes, you know, in life, y'all, sometimes, man, this you as growing up as a child, maybe you might not been favored, maybe you might not been loved more, you know. So it's saying all this, y'all, all this, you know what I mean? It just all this can play a whole life change because Diddy didn't have. I just see like Diddy didn't have the parenting that he was looking for. You know, lost his dad when he was a child, and he didn't, you know what I mean. His mom. It took his mom to have to raise him. You know what I mean. Mom. You know what I mean. His mom wasn't good growing up. His mom had to do what she can, man, to make it, man. You talking about poverty over there, man? Where they lived and was it Brooklyn they lived in? Poverty, man. You talking about that kind of mind me when I seen photos. Kind of remind me of the great commodity days. You know, Diddy made it. He wanted to make it out. And it's sad because we can look if you really know of him and really did some homework and research of and know his background, you know he wanted something. And how many people he helped before the industry been the way it is today. You gotta think how many people this man helped it. But you see, he's being accused a monster. They making him this monster. They paint him as a monster, man.
Another aha moment for me, a light bulb moment where I said, that's what Cassie testified, that Diddy controlled her rent, her cars, her clothing, her travel, and even cash. So again, I wonder if the jury said, that sounds familiar. There's a lot more to unpack, including that next
witness, George Kaplan, will be back on the stand tomorrow in the system. We'll unpack that. I want to talk to our great people minds as well. So follow me over to the table because we've got some really great conversations ahead. We have got defense attorney Joey Jackson, who is with us today. Also, former assistant U.S. attorney.
All right, you guys, for more content, for more live, please subscribe to this channel, man. Thank you guys for tuning in, man. You know what I mean? I gotta, you know what I mean, do another Diddy, you know, update. So you guys make sure you guys, tune in for the update. So, but like we always do it, man. To then we out. Make sure you follow me, subscribe to this channel, hit that like button for me, and definitely gonna be back with another recap of the Diddy's trial. To then we out.